Good evening, I'm Katerina Georgieva. Here's what's making news right now.
How many people need to live on the streets before we wake up and realize we've got a significant problem in this country? And my answer is one person who passes on our city streets. One person without a home is one person too many.
So the purpose of Walls to Bridges is in part to make education accessible for people who are incarcerated. But another goal of Walls to Bridges is also to help in community building and to help people to really build community across difference.
With relation between Lublin and Windsor, because we are twin cities, any issue which connect us and connect people, yeah, we should support each other.
Thanks for joining us. The death of a man experiencing homelessness this year has sparked conversations around the importance of tracking the people who die in Windsor's homeless community. That tracking isn't formally done in this city. And as the CBC's Jennifer Lagrassa reports, while some say that data could help improve services and funding, others aren't sure it would be valuable.
It was in this area on Olette Avenue between Wyandotte Street and Park Street that 69-year-old Anatole Rybus was found dead on January 31st. His death weighed heavily on the community. Local service providers and shelters recall meeting him. But his death would have gone largely unheard of had his family not posted to Twitter. That's because no one here in Windsor transparently and formally tracks the number of people who are experiencing homelessness and have died on city streets.
By not recording their deaths, it is almost like they never existed, or we want to pretend that they don't exist. And I can tell you that being a family member of Anatole's, he absolutely existed, and his life did have value. He would always try to make people laugh. He always brought lightness and levity and humor to every situation. And to think that his death might not be counted, it makes me depressed, frankly.
Being able to count the number of people who are homeless and have died on Windsor city streets didn't always seem necessary, but now it might be what brings about change.
What I now know is that what gets measured gets done. So as we begin to acquire better data, it seems to be the catalyst to get governments to move.
She says while it's important to count to understand how big of a problem this is, one death is already one too many. Toronto Public Health is one health unit in the province that collects and publicly shares this information. In an online dashboard, it reports the number of deaths along with age, gender, cause of the person's death, and the place they died. All of this, they say, has better informed their policies, programs, and services, led to improvements in their harm reduction strategies, and increased outreach on the streets. But even though it's working for Toronto, not everyone thinks Windsor will find it worthwhile.
I don't necessarily think that creating this just to put it out there actually adds any value. Such an infrequent situation that we often don't even understand what all the complex issues that led to that situation were. I would rather have another outreach worker on the street.
Bordelin also says when a situation like Rybus's happens, service providers are made aware. But when CBC News reached out to the following organizations, they didn't have this information. Many also didn't have access to it.
People who live on the streets are invisible to the system. By tracking that data about their deaths, I think it makes them visible.
Jennifer Lagrassa, CBC News, Windsor.
People involved in an educational program that brought together university students and inmates hope it can come back in the fall. Walls to Bridges offered credit courses to inmates at the Southwest Detention Center who studied alongside students from the outside. But it hasn't run for the past 2 years because of the pandemic, which those involved with the system say has been a huge loss. Dale Molnar has a story.
In 2017, the Women's and Gender Studies Department at the University of Windsor partnered with the Southwest Detention Center to start the Walls to Bridges program. University students took classes with the inmates at the jail. An instructor with the program says it benefited not only the inmates, but the outside students as well.
And so the idea here is that the university students are not there to help the incarcerated students. They're not volunteering. They're not mentoring. It's about bringing people from really diverse backgrounds into the same space so that people can learn together and from one another, co-learning.
Barrett says the program had such an impact on one university student, she decided to switch majors from computer science to law so she could eventually work with incarcerated people. A local defense lawyer says not having this program running is a real loss.
One of the three pillars of sentencing is supposed to be rehabilitation, and the idea that someone can aid themselves in their own rehabilitation while in custody is obviously it's an important tool in the criminal defense lawyer's toolbox, but it's also an important part of our justice system that, sending someone to jail isn't just a cost on the taxpayer, that there is some hope that they can learn skills while in there.
MPP Lisa Gretzky wants to see the program reinstated now that restrictions are being lifted.
I would also add that it's really important that where possible, the provincial government could step in and ensure that everybody has whatever they need, whether that's PPE or other things, in order for the program to be able to continue at the Southwest Detention Centre, even during a pandemic.
A spokesperson for the Ministry of the Solicitor General tells CBC News that even though the Walls to Bridges program isn't currently running, the inmates can still attend a literacy program and get addictions counseling. Barrett says that she hopes that the Walls to Bridges program can return in the fall. Dale Molnar, CBC News, Windsor.
The Russian invasion of Ukraine marks 2 weeks today. One of the first cities to feel the brunt of the Russian attack was Mariupol, an important port on the Black Sea in southeastern Ukraine, and it's been under siege since the early days of the fighting. There are now attempts to get a major relief effort into the city. Trucks and buses loaded with supplies were forced to turn back because of heavy Russian shelling. At the same time, Ukrainian officials continue to try to get people out. They say the humanitarian crisis in Mariupol is worsening as Russian forces keep up an unrelenting bombardment. And that includes the hit on a maternity hospital there yesterday. 3 people, including a child, were killed. The World Health Organization says 18 Ukrainian hospitals have been hit by Russian forces since the invasion began. Meanwhile, Ukraine and Russia held their highest level talks yet. Top diplomats from both sides met in Turkey. However, there have been no breakthroughs or key agreements. And Prime Minister Justin Trudeau met with Poland's Prime Minister today as he continues his meetings with European leaders about Ukraine. Later, Trudeau met with U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris, who is also in Poland for similar discussions.
We stand in solidarity in terms of our outrage at this war and the aggression that Russia has taken against Ukraine.
Warsaw and Washington have been in controversial talks about providing fighter jets to the Ukrainian Air Force. Earlier, Trudeau announced Ottawa is upping its matching contributions for donations to the Red Cross to a total of $30 million. He also pledged Canada will help with a war crime investigation following Russia's targeting of civilians and the maternity hospital in Mariupol. Members of Windsor's International Relations Committee held a Zoom conference with an official in Lublin today. That's Windsor's twin city in Poland. And it's only a 2-hour drive from the Ukrainian border. So it's one of the cities that's been taking in displaced people flooding in from Ukraine. Dale Molnar covered today's meeting with city officials and joins us live in studio now with more. Dale, during that conference, Lublin officials asked for help. So what exactly is the situation there?
Well, Katerina, Lublin has taken in about 30,000 displaced persons from Ukraine so far. Some are staying in shelters temporarily, and others are finding friends, family, and volunteers to take them into their homes. These are people who have fled Ukraine to Poland. These are pictures from the town that Windsor's Polish community raised money for last weekend. Over the Zoom meeting this afternoon, the director of Lublin's International Relations Cooperation Center says Windsor can help by first helping Ukraine, and sending money to 3 relief agencies dealing with the displaced people in Lublin, and finally prepare for refugees coming to Canada.
Some people would be happy to live in Windsor, and I'm absolutely sure that you will be happy to host them, but it will not be mass scale, and it's not on this stage. but perhaps thinking about orphanage, some orphans, all the families would be very, very helpful.
The city of Windsor twinned with Lublin in 2000. Since then, there have been a number of initiatives involving the relationship, including helping with a disaster in 2010.
Trudeau called immediately CBC, by the way, and asked if they can donate money for people which they were affected by flooding. So we're helping them. And now they have in different situation because of Ukraine.
Fred Francis, the chair of the International Relations Committee, is offering whatever help it can give.
One of the things I think the International Relations Committee can do, and we will go back to the rest of the committee members with this information, is that we can help coordinate the Polish local community, coordinate with the local Ukrainian community, and offer our assistance in maybe getting in touch with senior levels of government or representatives from other levels of government in helping with the coordination, helping with information sharing, and really getting the word out.
Francis says the committee's budget is small, so direct financial assistance would have to be combined with other fundraising efforts.
If you can do something directly in Ukraine, perfect. If you can push on the government to provide more assistance to Ukraine, this is your responsibility. This is what you should do.
And Fred Francis says they will take information back from this meeting to the rest of the committee members and City Council. Stanowski says whatever Windsor can do is important, as long as the city doesn't sit back and do nothing. Kat?
Thanks for this, Dale. CBC's Dale Molnar live in studio for us tonight. The local health unit is reminding residents to be cautious and kind to one another as more pandemic restrictions start to lift. Mask mandates at schools, gyms, and stores will be removed on March 21st, with remaining regulations set to drop at the end of April. The health unit is also reminding the public that despite this shift, nearly 2 years since the pandemic began, many have suffered significant losses because of COVID-19.
Due to these varying personal situations, it's normal to have some hesitancy as the restrictions are eased. We encourage everyone in our community to practice kindness overall and understanding. The understanding that someone's outlook and approach may be different from your own. Remember, we do not know everything going on in someone else's life, so act with kindness and acceptance as we move through these times of transition.
As for public transit, masks aren't going anywhere anytime soon.
Transit Windsor is federally regulated, and as such, we fall under federal masking and COVID-related rules. And at this point, the federal government has not indicated any rescinding of the masking requirement for federally regulated carriers. So for Transit Windsor, masking will remain in place until further notice.
For now, masks will still be mandatory on all buses until further notice, as he said, and staff at Transit Windsor are waiting for further instructions from the Federal Labor Ministry. The executive director says masks on board help protect riders and bus drivers who are working long periods in small, closed-off spaces, putting them at higher risk. He says ridership on transit buses continues to increase. Currently, the service is seeing roughly half the number of riders compared to pre-pandemic levels. They hope to return to the regular busing schedule sometime in September when post-secondary students begin their new academic year. With the rising cost of gas at the pumps, gas station owners say theft is also on the rise. An owner who runs a station in Leamington says earlier this week there were 2 drive-and dashes in one day.
It's not easy to like when you are just leave everything else and just keep focusing on the people filling up gas outside, because that's not how normally the Canadian society, like when we assume that everyone is financially, morally, they're very responsible people who whatever they fill up, they are coming inside to pay. But it happens, especially when they have like their purchasing power is buying power, I think, is impacted.
The president of Canadians for Affordable Energy says the price is where it's at for 3 reasons: the war in Ukraine, global supply issues, and the weak Canadian dollar. Chaudhry has installed high-quality cameras recently in response to the increase in thefts. Other owners in our region have told CBC they're seeing losses in the thousands at their stations, but they're wary to move to a prepay system because they say they lose business that way. The head of the Ontario Convenience Stores Association says gas theft has been an ongoing issue. Last year, there were an estimated 21,000 gas thefts across the province. Let's take a live look outside there. Some flurries ahead, if you can believe it, despite these spring-like temperatures today and yesterday as well. But a bit of snow expected tomorrow as well as into the weekend. Colette will be here after the break with your breakdown. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're going to get to weather in just a sec, but first, a very happy update for you on a story that first started getting attention a few weeks ago about a pooch from Alberta with a one-of-a-kind face and a big social media following.
Who's that? Brody.
Brody, a rescue dog with a curved snout, now has a matching canine companion, and the two make quite a sight. Colette is watching this with us. Brody's owner stumbled upon a photo of Raven, also a German Shepherd mix with a similar crooked smile at a Texas rescue, and felt instantly that the pair, they were just meant to be lifelong playmates, and then helped organize an epic plane journey and road trip to get the pup to Canada. And now, 2 weeks in, the Red Deer pair, they seem to be getting along just fine. Great time to bring in Colette. I mean, honestly, like soulmates, right?
I cannot tell you when I see the two of them together how much I love that. And you know that the smiles are turned to the same side, right? So they're like in unison. My pictures when I was a kid, I'd always just smile with one half of my face. And so I've got a bunch of images like that. Those dogs remind me of that.
Many of us did that.
Yeah, there you go. Oh, I just love that. That's an amazing story. I hope that makes everybody feel good and that the weather today did as well. Some nice conditions. We made it to 4.5, we'll say 5 degrees, 3 degrees right now for Windsor, and we're looking at 0 for Chatham, Kent, and just slipped below the freezing mark, starting at -1 there in terms of the activity. Well, quiet conditions now. That's some higher level cloud that we have, but there's a system that's moving our way. It's getting itself organized, and as it kind of comes together, it's sort of working in our favor, the sense that I think it's not really going to be well put together until it's kind of pushing by us. Doesn't mean it's not going to have an impact, but I think it'll be lesser than what it was looking like when I was looking at things a bit earlier in the week with it coming together. So we'll watch this with a cloud cover and some flurries through the overnight hours, becoming really intermittent into the morning hours, and then see how that kind of fills in right there, but we're just sort of on the border back here into southwestern Ontario, now along the north shore of Lake Erie, a little more significant, but more so into the Niagara region and into eastern Ontario. So that's where it will be a little messier and the accumulation's likely higher. Now there will be some strong winds blowing things around, a little bit cooler this weekend, so in many areas it's going to stick. But really, we will break back out of it, and it's kind of just going to be a couple of days, and then we get on to things warming up again into next week. So I'm looking at a few centimeters now. If it slips a little further north, that will go up. And on the back side of it into Sunday, we could see an additional kind of trace to a centimeter or two on top, but really the advisories are in these regions because that's where they're more towards the 10 centimeters or more in terms of accumulations. -2, the low tonight, and then tomorrow, 2 degrees, but the temperature likely falling into the afternoon. There's that cooler air one day, and then double digits. I mean, coming next week.
Not too bad.
That's something to give you a half smile or a full smile, whatever.
Exactly, something
Whatever
to look forward
suits you.
to. Whatever suits you. Thank you so much, Colette.
You're welcome.
When we come back, we're going to bring you updates from Beijing on day 7 of the Paralympic Games. Stay with us. 2 more hopefuls have confirmed they'll be running for the leadership of the Conservative Party of Canada.
Welcome to this leadership campaign for the Conservative Party of Canada and for the future of Canada.
The former leader of the now defunct Federal Progressive Conservative Party, Jean Charest, made it official today. The 63-year-old also served in the cabinet of Prime Minister Brian Mulroney before being elected as the Premier of Quebec as the leader of the Liberal Party. And the mayor of Brampton, Ontario, Patrick Brown, will launch his run for the job on Sunday. Brown is a former Ontario MPP who also led the province's PCs and served as a federal MP. Long-serving Ottawa area MP Pierre Poilievre announced his bid for the job several weeks ago. And more updates now out of Ukraine. Another plane load of Canadian aid is making its way to the country. It's filled with supplies collected through a community drive that was headed by Edmonton firefighters. CBC's Julia Wong has more.
This plane you see here behind me is taking off from Edmonton, headed to Ukraine to help out with humanitarian efforts there. More than 10 tons of equipment costing millions of dollars have been packed onto this plane, and it includes medical supplies like tourniquets, medical gauze, and thermal blankets. There's also firefighting equipment as well as tactical equipment for soldiers like warm clothes, binoculars, and protective eyewear. Now, these donations are a result of efforts from organizations here in Edmonton, and all have been bought or donated by businesses, community members, or fire rescue services. In fact, the plane itself has been provided, organizers say, by an American donor. Alberta has a large Ukrainian community. There are about 350,000 people here of Ukrainian descent, and the invasion of Russian troops into Ukraine has hit many of them hard. It's had a very deep impact on people in this province, and many of them have felt compelled to help out in this very tangible way by providing potentially life-saving equipment that could make a difference immediately.
They're giving the tools to fight the fires, they're giving the tools to treat the wounded, they're giving the tools to find the people that are in these buildings that are collapsed.
I can only hope that that's going to save somebody's life and as many lives as possible. One thing we want to focus on is making sure that people live in Ukraine.
Volunteers from Edmonton will escort the donations to the Ukrainian border and then will hand them off to the state emergency services of the Ukrainian government. Julia Wong, CBC News, Edmonton.
Canada's wheelchair curling team has clinched a spot in the semifinals at the Paralympics in Beijing. Here is Devin Haru with a look at the team's big win over Norway today and at the success of Canada's para-ice hockey team.
Just 3 days of competition remaining here at the Paralympics in Beijing. The Canadians not reaching the podium on day 6. It marks the first time at these games Canada hasn't won a medal in a day of competition, so the medal tally remains at 16. But inside the ice cube, right here earlier today, a dramatic scene for the Canadian wheelchair curling team, needing a victory over Norway and trailing 6-4 in the final end. The Canadians, with hammer, throwing 8 perfect stones. And last rock thrower, John Thurston, delivering a hit for 3. The Canadians winning the game 7-6, a joyous scene inside the ice cube and booking a ticket into Friday afternoon's semifinal game. Canada now awaits a final draw to find out who they will play in the semifinal, but it marks another games that Canadian wheelchair curlers will play for a medal at the Paralympics. There's another semifinal on Friday afternoon involving a Canadian team, the para-ice hockey team taking on Korea in the semifinal. Canada, a perfect 35-0 all-time against Korea, and they're looking to keep the streak alive and book a ticket into the championship game as well. We're heading down this stretch at the Paralympics. For CBC Sports, I'm Devin Haru in Beijing.
And that is it for CBC Windsor News. For news anytime, go to our website, cbc.ca/Windsor. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great night.